Hello, Como Park Lutheran Church. Um, this is Esther Cianipar, and I would like to share with you what Wisdom Sunday is at Como Park Lutheran Church. It is a series that we hope to continue to have twice a year during the adult forum after Sundays worship, where an elder member of the church will come and share their faith journey, God's moments, God's miracles in their lives throughout their time at Como Park Lutheran Church. And it is also a way for intergenerational connections between our younger future generations and our elders to have a deeper relationship. So enjoy the series and God bless you. Bye. Oh, sure you know Dick, yeah. So let's give a round of applause for Dick. Motivation. And thank you for our Sunday school students and teachers that are here. And so we will start the recording for this session, and Ed will help us with the recording. And Dick, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Esther. I had planned originally to let you know that we should really get started now because I promised Rosemary that we'd be done by 3. And we may or may not take a 20-minute lunch. Anyway, thank you for coming. I never really thought about the word wisdom until I got this assignment. I tried to resist the assignment and told Esther that, you know, most people here know my story and they've heard it before and they don't want to hear it again. She said, no, you have to come and do this, and so here we are. As I scouted around, I didn't do deep research, but I did a little bit of looking at what does the word mean, wisdom. And I didn't go to the dictionary, that sort of thing. And I know there's biblical definitions of wisdom and wisdom literature and that sort of stuff. But the phrase that caught my attention was the person that wrote, "Wisdom is knowing what matters." And it comes from age, life, and coping with ups and downs. And through that process, and I qualify in the age front, I had a few ups and downs, and I've lived kind of a robust sort of life, I think. And so I might have a little bit to share. The other reading that I'll come back to a little later, I think if we have time, is the one that said, beliefs become thoughts, thoughts become action, and action becomes life. You could almost sometimes skip right from beliefs become your life. You live your life through your beliefs, through the thoughts you're having, and through the actions you take and how you live this life. I've got some thoughts about that in regard to what we're going to talk about a little later. I think most of you know that before we moved to the cities, we lived in Cambridge, Minnesota for 33 years, raised our family there. I received 23 or 24 years ago, received a serious cancer diagnosis. I was given 2 years to live, up to 2 years to live. We scrambled like crazy, moved to the city so that Zarita would, when I was gone, Zarita would be close to family, her family and my family. And we ended up scouting out the terrain for church because we were going to be connected to another faith community and ended up here. In the process, went through, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the details of this diagnosis and all, but I did have a couple of rounds of chemotherapy and then major surgery. And the initial shock of the diagnosis was just incredibly challenging and difficult. I had no pain. I didn't have any outward symptoms other than I had blood in my urine. And I went into the doctor for that, and the doctor concluded that I had the diagnosis was that I had stage 4 bladder cancer, and I had a 5% chance of living 2 years. So we started, the reaction was just, I mean, we were shocked, we cried and clutched and cried some more and clutched some more, and a deep, heavy darkness descended over us. I mean, I've never felt heavy darkness before this point, but it was heavy, heavy darkness. And that lasted a week. I think my diagnosis was on a Tuesday, I believe. I'd asked the doctor that had rendered the diagnosis that I'd like a referral to the Mayo Clinic. That doctor made arrangements for us to go to the Mayo Clinic, had that arrangement made by the end of that week. Monday, we went to the Mayo Clinic, and I walked through the door, and the darkness was gone. I remember that, going through that door. Fear was gone, darkness was gone, and I had a profound sense of peace. That was not a temporary sense. That sense is with me today. Anyway, let me stop it. Still here. In the process, we made sure our financial affairs were in order. We sold our house. We moved. We made all the typical sort of on the surface arrangements for her to be able to continue beyond me. But one of the things that happened along the way, I read an article in I think I'd had 1 round of chemo, I'd had my surgery, I was recovering from that, I was going to have some more chemo, and I read this Saturday paper. There was a fellow named Clark Morphew, was a Lutheran pastor who wrote a weekly article in the St. Paul paper. And he told about something called ethical wills. I'd never heard of it. So we had our will all arranged, and we had our financial affairs all arranged. And here comes this description of something called an ethical will. And as I read, it's exactly what it was a God-sent thing. It was a God thing that landed in my lap. Because I wanted to be able to communicate to my children and my future grandchildren what it was that their grandfather believed. So I sent away for a pamphlet. By the way, if you go online now, there's all kinds of resources about ethical will. So the whole thing about the ethical will was to be able to put into writing what it is you believed, your values and your beliefs, what it is that made you the person that you are in a faith sense. So I did that. I sent for the pamphlet. The pamphlet came. I was disappointed. It was a short pamphlet, and it had examples of ethical wills and had things like, I want you to know that I believed in truth, trust, and integrity. look after your mom or dad or whatever. Don't lose contact with your brothers and sisters. You know, kind of stuff like that isn't what I wanted something a little different. I didn't know what. And as I pondered that, had a sheet of paper in front of me. I'm going to start telling my kids what it was that their father believed and their grandfather believed. And it took a while. It finally came up with this. I decided to write for them my journey of faith. And the subpart here is the important part. What I learned that I want to share with you. I wanted to go beyond the journey, beyond the episodes of faith-based nurturing and development, and talk about what I've learned along the way. Other times when I've talked about this with people, I've then gone on from there and done some stuff. I've never gone to the end of the story. What did I recommend to them? And I want to do that now. I don't want to run out of time, because I can talk. I know that about myself. So let me pull, and I'm going to read these. I think there's 9 or 10. Oh, I'm shaking, excuse me. By the way, I had these printed on archival paper, so they won't deteriorate over time. I had these folios crafted by a good friend who's a leather worker and made these folios, and each kid got one of these. And just an aside before I go down this business of what I told them is very first time we got together after my diagnosis with the kids, I told them, I don't want you blaming this on God. God didn't give me this cancer. I smoked. I chose to smoke. And that caused my cancer. God didn't do that. Keep God out of that whole, forget about that notion, if they had it at all. Okay, the summary paragraph. You've heard of the poem or the story about footprints. Many of us are familiar with that. There's God and a person are walking through a desert where footprints are left in the sand. And as God and this person are talking about and looking back at this person's life, there are portions where there's 2 sets of prints in the sand. And there's portions where there's 1 set. And then it picks up again, there's 2, and so forth. And as the fellow, and that was as the fellow was looking there, he says, God, I don't understand. Because there's two sets of prints and then there's 1. You know, those times when there was only 1 set of footprints, those are times in my life where I needed you. And God said to him, that set of footprints are marked.
That's when I carried you.
Are mine, I was carrying you. That whole story has had a profound effect on me personally, because I believe that deeply. Here's the kind of the wrapping up paragraph, and then I'll read the last. I recognized in retrospect, like looking at the footprints, that I was being carried by the Lord through the good times as well as the bad. The whole time, my entire life. All the people I met, these are going to my kids' stuff. This isn't meant for your ears. It was meant for theirs, but they're sharing it with you. All the people I met along the way who shaped my course, all the experiences I had that influenced my thinking, all the insights, observations, and perceptions that I gleaned along the way, all the words, everything was provided by him. I have been in his care forever. Still am. So are you. Not just me. This isn't reserved for the speaker this morning. This is you as well. You're in his care. And you'll be there forever. You can never get away. Neither can I. And I don't want to. I must admit that I have enjoyed writing about my journey of faith for you. By the way, as I wrote, I had my two kids' face in the front of my memory. I was writing directly to them. I must admit I've enjoyed writing about my journey of faith for you. My hope is that it will provide you with an understanding of me and will influence you in your personal faith journey. Now, what I have learned that I'd like you to always remember. This, by the way, you're going to recognize it. It's very Lutheran. Still, it's good. I love Lutheran. Anyway, I've learned that the love of our God knows no bounds. We hear that preached every Sunday right up here. Over and over again. I don't know about you, but I need to hear it. So keep doing it. I've learned that I am a child of God, and so are you. We are all children of God. We've been marked with the cross of Christ forever, right here. All of us. Children of God. Somewhere along the line you might want to ask, well, so what does that mean? And we'll get to a little bit of that. I mean, that's a profound understanding. If you understand yourself as a child of God, it means no more pussyfooting around. It means being serious about how we serve the Lord, how we follow. I've learned that as children of God, we are blessed to be a blessing. We heard that this morning. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. God blessed Abraham and promised that through him all the blessings, the whole world will be blessed. We are descendants of that blessing. We're recipients. Pass it on. I've learned that we are called to a life of discipleship and servanthood. That we are called to provide food for the hungry, drink for the thirsty, shelter for the homeless, care for the sick, clothing for the naked, and attend to every other need of God's needy children. So what, you're a child of God? This is what? We're called to serve the Lord. We're called to serve his needy people. I learned that the Spirit of Christ already dwells in each of us. At least in me. And you as well. That we are often too self-absorbed to hear and to know that. I'm going to read that again. I've learned that the Spirit of Christ already dwells in each of us, and that we are often too self-absorbed to hear and to know. But when we do listen and hear, we are constantly called to love our neighbors. I mean, when we slow down enough, we turn our phone. Today, when I wrote this, cell phones were not common. I'm sure they were around 25 years or 24 years ago. But we got to put stuff down and be quiet and listen. And hear. I've learned that from time to time, we must go to a quiet place alone for rest and prayer. We must disconnect from the noise and busyness of modern life and listen to the Spirit within. Remember, I started this kind of string with the Spirit of Christ dwells within us. And unless we slow down, unless we quiet down, unless we become apart from our daily busyness and noise, we can't hear the Spirit. I've learned that we must be nourished by the Word often. And that I tell them, go to church. Be a part of a faith community. I don't know how you are, but I need to hear the Word regularly. I need to be reminded. Excuse me. I've learned that I have been in the constant care of God all my life, and so are you. On a personal level, I learned that I am prepared for whatever the future holds for me. See, I didn't know I was going to make it. We didn't know, but I was okay. The light overcame the darkness, and I was okay. Whatever the outcome was personally okay with me. My family was going nuts and traumatized. My wife was traumatized. My children were traumatized, but I was okay. I mean, I was prepared for whatever. Anyway. I'm at peace at the center of my being. That's what I'm saying. I was at peace at the center of my being. The light and the Spirit I wrote about earlier, that's kind of in the content, are present there. They are the Christ dwelling in my heart, unmerited gifts for which I am profoundly grateful. I did nothing to earn this. Not a single thing. Nothing. I didn't pray for it. I didn't ask for it. I didn't grovel in the dirt and say, why me? Why us? What's this all about? The unmerited gift. Actually, faith is an unmerited gift. And it's an unmerited gift that keeps on giving over and over and over and all the time. I'm profoundly grateful. I mean, I've had some life experiences these last 24 years I wouldn't have had. Actually, I wasn't supposed to have because I had a cancer that there was no cure at the time. My prayer for you and your children, I'm talking to my kids and then their kids. We had 2 grandchildren at the time, so there were 2, now we have 3. My prayer for you and your children and our descendants beyond is simple. That you will find the light of Christ dwelling within you, and that you will joyfully live a life of faith-filled servanthood. That they will hear the call. That they will recognize the light within them. They will hear the Spirit prompting them to do this or do that or go this way or that way. And I see that in my children. And faith-filled servant, amen. I ended it with amen. I love you, I love you, I love you. Dad/Papa. I'm Papa to my grandchildren. Oh, where do we go from here? Yes.
I have a question, Dick.
Yep.
The doctor told you that you would had a 5% chance of living beyond 2 years.
Yes.
As you approached the 2-year mark, was there a recognition by the doctor that somehow his prediction would need to be revised a little bit, or did you just kind of like wonder every month, well, I'm living on borrowed time, it's going to happen any time? What was the
Wasn't anything like that.
it wasn't what happened after that 2 year?
The doctor that made the initial diagnosis was from Cambridge. I eventually landed at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, where I walked through the door right into the middle of a clinical study for my incurable cancer. And I met my doctor for the first time at 9:30 on that Monday morning. An hour and a half later, 11 o'clock, I'm signing the papers to join the clinical study for my exact kind of cancer. At 12 o'clock, 2.5 hours after I met him, I'm in the treatment suite getting my first 5-hour experimental chemo treatment. I mean, talk about a God thing. I mean, I've never experienced healthcare like that. Ever. I mean, I'm 82, I've never experienced it any time where stuff went boom, boom, boom. Now, the outcome of those experimental drugs, there were 6 treatments. They were two drugs, Taxol and cisplatin. I was taking them, and I'm talking to my oncologist at Mayo, and I said, I want more of these drugs. I don't want to stop at 6. He says, we have to stop at 6. because the cancer had spread from my bladder to my lymph nodes. So we could look on the CAT scan and see the lymph nodes shrinking, disappearing. And anyway, where was I going with this? I forgot.
You wanted more treatments.
Yeah, I wanted more treatments, and he said, no, we can't have more treatments. And those 6 treatments I got completely wiped out the cancer. Oh yeah, I know what I was going to say. 1/3 of the people had in the clinical study group had no response. 1/3 of the people had a partial response. 1/3 of the people had a complete response. I was there. Again, a God thing.
Now, did they all receive the same, or were the
Identical. No, it was the identical regimen, identical quantities.
Yep.
The 2 drugs that were put in combination were older drugs that had been around for a while, but never used in this way for this kind of cancer. So the clinical study was to see if we put these 2 drugs together for stage 4 bladder cancer. Well, they must have had some indication that it might work, because for 1/3 of us, it did work.
The other people in the study were also forced.
Yes, yeah. We were all in the same boat, stage 4, all with little or no prospect.
How many people do you know?
In the 30s.
In the 30s?
I never met another person
Okay.
that was in the group. My oncologist used to talk about a fellow from, I handled it fairly well, I think. Did I handle it well? He used to talk about a fellow from Wisconsin that owned a small business, and he'd go get his treatment, he'd go back to work, and he'd work
Yeah.
like nothing happened. And he was having I had the sense that he was having a similar response as I was having. I know it knocked me on the treatment knocked me down for a week. The first time I had that treatment, went home that night, drove back to Cambridge, went to bed, normal time, and what they had given me was, what is this, to deal with side effects of, what was it?
Anti-nausea? Anti-nausea?
It was anti-nausea stuff, but I couldn't sleep. Prednisone or something like that. I couldn't sleep. I went to bed, but I couldn't close my eyes, they'd open up. I wasn't worried, I couldn't sleep from whatever it was, the anti-nausea stuff. And I was reading matchbook covers, I was reading cereal boxes. And so the next time I had my second treatment, I had a stack of stuff to read. That wasn't going to happen. But that was my bodily reaction to that first round of treatment. And then eventually lost all my hair, and I kind of figured out how to cope with it.
When you came to Como.
Pardon me?
When the first time that you came to Como, you didn't have hair.
No, I was very, very bald, yeah. Marty Tollefson spotted me coming through, and he accosted me. Oh, here.
Yeah.
All right. We'll fix that. Yes,
So 24 years ago, you didn't know you had an additional 24 years.
I did not.
So how did, over time then, do you realize that you were sort of redefining yourself, or you knew that you had gotten a second chance? And every day I guess you know that. You don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow, nobody really does, but looking back, how did you know that you just needed to keep building that faith? It must have gotten stronger over time, or
I don't remember thinking that way yet. I think for me, one of the go back to the Bible verse that Marty mentioned this morning. It's worth pondering this verse. That God promised Abraham that he would bless Abraham, and Abraham would be a blessing to the whole world. We're descendants of Abraham. We're a part of that line. And we've received the blessing. What are we supposed to do when we get blessing? We're supposed to pass it on. So my thinking, my orientation, it wasn't conscious thinking, but my orientation was to continue to reach out and serve, whatever that meant. So I continued to do that. Sometimes I wasn't able because I was disabled by the chemicals, but as soon as I was able, I was back at it. And it's just been a calling, a profound calling. I mean, when we came to this church, we've joined a couple churches along the way, but when we came to this church, we came in the side door. I wanted to know what the social missions of this church were. I wanted to know if they're looking inward or if they're looking outward, or are they doing both? I wanted to know if they were reaching out and serving the community. And I discovered Roy Muscatello. We know Roy, Mr. Social Missions. I had coffee with Roy I asked, could I buy you a cup of coffee someday over at the coffee shop over here? And I forewarned him, I'm going to stalk you, Roy. I'm going to find out what you're doing and how this church is serving the community and serving neighbors. And so the church, if you will, in fact, I think I joined the Social Missions Committee before we joined the church. We became part of that committee before we actually became members. It was very important to both of us. And so it was kind of a natural orientation. What's that? Yeah, then the cancer came back, by the way. Forgot to mention that.
How many years later?
2.5 months later.
2.5 months?
Yep. You know, when you have a cancer diagnosis and you go through and they, by the way, is somebody keeping track of time?
I am.
Good. Tap me on the shoulder. When you've gone through the process, you usually, and the cancer is cleared or in remission or whatever, you usually have a 3-month appointment. You go through a series of 3-month appointments, and then if you continue to be clear, it then goes to like 6 months and then a year. So I had my first 3-month appointment. By this time, we'd moved to the city. We were over on Iowa. And the blood returned to my urine. Blood in the urine again, a little speck. And we called my oncologist. I think we went in the next day. But yeah, we got in right away. See, the first time, there are stages of cancer. There's stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. I had stage 4, that's the worst. That means that the cancer has spread to another body system. So it spread from my bladder to the lymph nodes. That's bad. The second time, though, I had, as far as we knew, stage 1. It was still in the bladder. We went down, I think, the next day or day after that or whatever, almost immediately confirmed that it was back. And he picked up the phone, called his surgeon, and said, when you got an opening? He had an opening almost immediately. The day after Christmas that year, what, 98, whatever. That was a tough Christmas, by the way. Anyway, for the family. So I had my bladder removed. And I've got a bag and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Hasn't held me back any. And so then had that bladder removed, major surgery. I recovered from that well, and then I had another 16 chemo treatments after that. It was 12, I'm sorry. 3 times 4 is 12, right? Yeah. No, I had 16, I had four series. It was far worse than the first round. It was just awful stuff. I described it as turpentine mixed with urine, mixed with the most horrific smelling stuff you could ever imagine. It was in little bottles about this big. I had to drink that, yeah. Yeah. And the alternative, if I didn't drink it, was my kidneys were going to fail, which you don't want your kidneys to fail, ever. So the alternative, not drinking it, and I didn't even dare not drink this stuff. But it was just awful. Did I mix it with juice? I think I did. What? Grape juice, yeah. Wake up, I had to set the alarm because I had to do several of these after each treatment, you know, like at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and then I go back for another treatment the next day and do it again the next day. And I'd set the alarm and oh no, I can't do this.
You can't look at grape juice.
No, right. I'd hold my breath because I didn't want to breathe this stuff. It was just awful. Anyway, it all turned out. I did it, and then I started after that. By the way, I didn't have, the cancer had remained in the bladder. It hadn't gotten out the second time, and the next round of chemo was precautionary, just in case a cell or two got out and started drifting around in there somewhere. I'd like to go back to, if I may, unless you have any questions or comments. Did that answer your question? I told about getting the diagnosis, heavy darkness, and the darkness disappeared. First thing I want to comment about that is, you know, we read near-death stories about people who see a light coming down a tunnel, and, you know, you're attracted to it and so forth. It's not that, for me, it wasn't that kind of light. The kind of light it was is the dawn of the morning. And I'm a real early bird, and this might be one of the things I really like about that hour of the day, because I get up when it's dark. And before I know it, it's light. The light overcomes the darkness. 1 John chapter 1, I think it's verse 5. God is light, and in him there's no darkness at all. That Bible verse provided me with the answer. So where did the darkness go? Because I was wondering. I told you before, I didn't pray for it, I didn't ask for it. It happened. It just happened. And it happened twice. It happened the first time, And then when I had the diagnosis the second time, I wondered, because the second time was almost as dark as the first time. I mean, it was a crushing thing because we thought it was gone, and here it's back already 2.5 months. And it happened twice. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. And for me, when I talk in here about, and I tell this story in written form in the narrative, on a personal level, I've learned that I'm prepared for whatever the future holds for me. I'm at peace at the center of my being. The light and the spirit I wrote about earlier are present there. That light is still there. Right there. I think this is called bosom, isn't it? It's a treasure. It's a gift. Faith is a gift. The light is a gift. The Spirit's a gift. All gift. I've got other stuff in the narrative, I don't know. I want to talk a little bit about baptism. I even looked up the Baptismal Liturgy. This is where it all started. For me and for you. This is where it started. This faith business, this gift business, this descendant business. It's the final declaration that it moves me every time I hear it when we have a baptism in this sanctuary. You know, I'll just insert my name in here. Dick, child of God. You have been sealed by the Holy Spirit and marked with the cross of Christ forever. We have a reminder of that at Ash Wednesday, that cross of Christ forever. It's a very profound, I think, I didn't always have this in my life, that I understood the importance of this act of being welcomed into God's family and claimed forever. When I think of this being claimed forever, I think of Romans 8. Nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. Not this, not that, not that, not this, not that. If I'm naughty, if I'm good, if I'm whatever, nothing can separate me, us, I should say, from the love of God. I link that Romans 8 with this baptismal claim on my life. I'm God's child, so are you. And I can never get away. I've had moments in my life where perhaps I've tried. You know, I haven't been as aware and as rigorous and as knowing. So this started it all. Child of God, touched by the Spirit, sealed by the Spirit, marked with the cross of Christ forever. I tell a story that's related to the prodigal story. It happened in my life. I saw it firsthand. Prodigal story, wayward son, gets an inheritance, goes out in the world, squanders it, eats with the pigs or something like that. Comes back, crawling back on his hands and knees, and his father welcomes him and has a party. That parable, for me, describes our God and what our God is in relationship to us. We can wander off and so forth, but when we return, if we return, even if we have to return. Our Lord celebrates our return and welcomes us back. That loving God never stopped loving us. Not ever. Now, how I saw that in my personal life was my father, I'm the youngest of five, way youngest of five. And when my father died, I was age 12, and it was just my mother and I at home. My older siblings, the 2 brothers and 2 older sisters, were married and off and gone, and they're making their life in the world. So it's just the 2 of us. And but one of these brothers of mine, both my brothers were alcoholics, but one of these brothers of mine was really pretty nasty. And he abused my mother unmercifully. Just terrible. Said terrible things, did terrible things, was terrible. And I'd say to her, why don't you throw that bum out? I'm 16, I'm 15, 16 years old. I even knew, that this was not right, that we treat her this way. And the fact of the matter is, there's nothing that could separate him from her love. Just like our God is with us. There's nothing we can do to separate ourselves from God's love. And my brother was living technicolor. When I told some of these stories, by the way, my oldest sister really got ticked off that I talked like this. I was telling secrets, family secrets. But anyway, what else? Another thing, I talked about the importance, the kickoff thing for me in this faith journey was the baptism. There's 2 stories I want to tell about that. One is, after somewhere along the line, Zarita and I started doing some international travel. And the very first thing we did was we went to Sweden. Yay for Sweden. No, I'm Norwegian anyway. When we had started dating, before we got married, she used to talk about a cousin that had gone to Sweden, found the ancestral home of their grandfather, the immigrant grandfather, and on that farm in Sweden, in rural Sweden, there's a barn, and in the barn was a post, and on the post was the initials, is it EPS? What is it? APS. Big letters, about this big, carved in this wooden post, and underneath the year 1775. And it's Rita's great, 3 greats, I think. 2 greats back. When he bought the farm in 1775, he carved his initials and that on the post. Now, I had told her when we were dating, she talked about it all the time, wanting to go there and find that post. So when in the midst of the cancer thing, I realized that, and I promised I'd take her. I'll take you there sometime. And I'm 23 years old. What do I know? Anyway, when I had the cancer thing and things started brightening, I said we should go to Sweden and find that farm, find that post, fulfill that commitment, and we did that. And we found it, and we made an impression of it out of clay. And a friend of mine who's a potter, he made a plaster Paris plaque of those initials and that date. We have it displayed prominently in our house right now. But a part of that, the surprise, the gift, another gift. The gift was finding it, another gift. The church that her ancestors attended was down the road. There's a lake and a cemetery and this church. It was just like a little museum. Apparently the family, when the roads were really bad and muddy back in the olden days, they used to take a boat to church and they pull it up by the cemetery, and then they could just walk over. Well, we went inside the church. The caretaker there met us and he let us in and he did a little tour. One of the things he pointed out was this magnificent chandelier that had Zarita's great and great great grandfather's names on it. It was a gift to the church from them. But even better yet, off over to the side was the baptismal font. We didn't, no big deal. It was over there. And he took us over there and he said, you know, back in the day, this baptismal, it was stone. It was about this big around, and I don't think it was one piece, maybe it was two. But anyway, he said back in the day, this baptismal font used to be out in the outside, and you couldn't enter the church. A child, an infant, or anyone couldn't enter the church unless they were baptized. So the baptisms took place outdoors. And somewhere along the line, the members of this faith community brought the baptismal font inside. Apparently it became okay. And then the caretaker said, this is where your great-great-grandfather was baptized. And grandfather. And the two greats and the grandfather, the immigrant. This is where he was baptized. She bent over spontaneously and kissed the rim of that baptismal font. You see, our connection to baptism didn't start with us. She can trace it back to this little rural church in the boondocks in Sweden, where her great-great-great-grandfather, great-grandfather, and grandfather were all baptized. And her mother was baptized in a little town in Wausau, Nebraska. And she was baptized at a little church over here, Zion Church, over in the neighborhood in the Midway District. So we can trace the ancestry of this child of God, touched by the Holy Spirit, marked with the cross of Christ forever. It didn't start with us. Yes. What time is it?
We have 5 more minutes.
She said, Rita said, stop talking. What else? Yeah.
We should get Zarita to be on the report.
Yeah.
Zarita, you want to come up and talk? You want to come and talk?
What do you think?
And she's very comfortable where she is. Wave at the camera anyway.
And for your future generations.
Okay, I have one last thing. I talked about the baptism thing as being integral. Let me see if I can find. I want to talk about the next best thing besides baptism. There it is. And I've got a third best thing too, if you have time. Maybe even 4. Okay. This sentence is in the written narrative. After my baptism, meeting Mom is the single most important event in my faith journey. Let me tell you why. My faith life as a kid, I was the youngest. I'm 8 years younger than my next oldest sister. I mean, I was really a caboose. My dad died along the way, and my mom worked Sundays, and we did, she insisted that I get confirmed and that sort of thing and so forth. But we didn't have a family sort of faith life like some of you young people have. So when we married, Mom's influence on my faith journey was that of having a subtle and substantial influence over me relating to the church. In contrast to my family, Mom's family attended one church their entire life. They also lived in one house their entire life, 70 plus years. But anyway, the senior pastor and his wife were their best friends. Both Ruth and Ivan, that's her mom and dad, were involved in the life of the Christian community beyond worship. Study and prayer were an integral part of their life. Ivan taught Sunday school, served on the church board for many years. Their life was centered in the life of the church, and Mom brought that to our marriage. And it eventually became our life, our family life model. It wasn't mine to begin with, but this was a gift through our marriage from her and her family. I treasure it. That's the second. After baptism, meeting this young woman right here. In more ways than one. The third thing, and then I'll stop. Third most important has to do with parenting our children. We had at Cambridge, we had an associate pastor. His name was Joel Borschelt. Joel, I think, took a church somewhere in southern Minnesota, maybe down around your area. You were probably gone by then, but anyway. Joel preached one Sunday. Our kids were really little. And I was wondering what all this church thing was going to be in parenting and how we were going to do things. Joel preached a sermon one Sunday where he reported the results of a study that indicated that if the father in the family was involved in the life of the church beyond worship, the likelihood that the children will follow with a life of faith is very high. And kaboom, for me, what's my role in this parenting business as far as faith is concerned? I'm going to model for my children the faith life I want them to absorb. And they will see it through me and hopefully connect. We have people right here in this sanctuary where that happens. Where your kids have the gift that you've shared. So it's baptism and meeting Mom and really realizing the role that as a parent that I had in passing on the faith were the three most important things. I hope this has been worth your time. I appreciate your attendance. And go in peace and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.